Hey guys, so I'm finally done with finals, done with IB, done with all that shizzle-mac. To everyone else that just finished IB and finals in general, congrats! No matter how you do, you still made it, and it's time to just chill, cause it gets crazy. What I'm bringing to you guys today is a new series where I pretty much want to talk about linguistics research, and more broadly, the creation and dissemination of knowledge in general. It'll probably usually have a focus on linguistics, but also expect videos on the current state of academia in general, since it's something I've been obsessed with investigating as of late. This video specifically is going to talk about a paper called The Arabic Origins of English Pronouns, a Lexical Root Theory Approach by Zaidan Ali Jassem. An example of just awful linguistics research while also explaining why it's bad, which I think is a really important step since the idea isn't just to point and laugh, it's to actually learn something and hopefully help correct faulty knowledge and overall make sure we're advancing in the right direction. I was originally going to talk about 3 examples, but I realized I wanted to go really in-depth into these to make sure I'm fulfilling that goal. All this means is that you'll be able to expect videos that are more in-depth, though remember this is just a series, so I'll also be putting out shorter videos on the side. I'm also using this video to experiment with some new things. First of all, I added video chapters, which means you can just scroll through different parts of the video. And second of all, if you could tell, I don't have music for this video, since people either loved it or hated it, kinda no in between. So maybe in the future I'll just have soft ambient sound instead, like waves or nature or fire, something like that. Maybe lo-fi, but for now I'll just leave the music out and see how it goes. Anyway, let's get to business. Jassem's argument is simple. He uses lexical root theory to claim that all personal pronouns in English, and by extension German, French, and Latin, ultimately come from Arabic, and that we've misclassified those languages as being part of different language families. Lexical root theory is a system Jassem created to examine the genetic relationship between languages. In his own words, it is so called because it is based on the lexical root of the word. The paper starts off pretty good. He defines cognates, which are related words like Buch and Buch in German, and then discusses the Swadesh lists, which, although not uncontroversial, can be a way of comparing languages when looking for genetic similarity by translating a list of words in both languages and comparing them. But then he begins his argument, which is where things get a little weird. Immediately, we're hit with an interesting reference. Indeed, this is the first of 9 other times he references his past work within a 20-page paper, in this case citing how he contested the idea that English and Arabic belong to different language families. Fair enough though, I guess. Let's hear him out. Jassem then presents the personal pronouns of the languages he's working with. I've rearranged the ones for modern English and Arabic for clarity since those are the most relevant to the topic. This part of the video is timestamped for quick access if you want to go back and look at them again at any time. Immediately we have a problem though. Jassem never specifies what variety of Arabic we're talking about. For example, in Moroccan Darija, the first person singular prefix is not a but rather n, as in I need to go cut my nails. Based on his tables, however, I was thinking we can at least assume he speaks a modern variety of Arabic, seeing as he makes no mention of any dual forms, which would have been present if he was talking about classical Arabic, for example. If this is true, this would immediately invalidate probably every claim in this paper, since he'd be implying that Latin pronouns, a language spoken many thousands of years ago, came from an Arabic variety spoken today, further implying Arabic speakers are time travelers, but I digress since I don't really know for sure, so let's keep reading the paper. This is rather small, but I also noticed he romanizes the voiceless pharyngeal fricative ha as the number 2. If you didn't know, when writing Arabic in the Latin alphabet, we almost always use numbers to represent some of the sounds that are kind of weird to spell in Latin, like the voice pharyngeal fricative, which is written with a 3. The voiceless counterpart is much more predominantly written with the number 7, since the number 2 is often used for the glottal stop, as in andi su'el, I have a question. In a piece of text where you're trying to teach something, I feel like you should try to use the more widely used version to make sure you're understood and get some of those descriptivism points. Anyway, he then describes the steps of lexical root theory. First, he reduces words to their roots, the examples he provides being fifthly becoming 5, and uniqueness becoming 1. Fair enough, though another small thing. I'd argue that the root of uniqueness is actually unique, since although unique ultimately does come from the Latin word for 1, which is unus, we're talking about the language right now at this point of lexical root theory, so I don't know. Step 2 is the phonetic analysis, probably the most important part of the system. He explains reasonably accurately that basically any sound can become a totally unrelated sound over time. He uses this to claim how the last dental fricative, th in Arabic thaleth, meaning 3, split into 3 sounds in English, ta, da, and sa, as in the words trio, third, and thrice. I'll talk about this more later, but although he has a third step, phonetic analysis really is his main tool. Like I said, his third step he claims to use is morphological and semantic analysis, though in the same paragraph he says that because morphological and semantic analysis do not influence the meaning of the lexical root, they are not critical at this stage and can be ignored. Therefore. So, whatever. He also claims that lexical root theory can, in consequence, also explain the Arabic origins of all European languages, which is a problem since it's not clear what he means by European language. Does this also include Uralic languages like Finnish? What about Basque? Anyway, now that we know how Jessam is looking at these words, let's take a look at some of his examples, which he prefaces with, all English pronouns have direct, true, and real Arabic cognates as follows. If there's one thing I love about him, it's his confidence, cause goddamn. But anyway, his sixth example tells us that the English first-person plural possessive pronoun our comes from the Arabic suffix na, as in shafuna, they saw us, where na became n, then ar, then our. First of all, na to ra isn't impossible, but it's not extremely common. But more importantly, he never really explained what reversal meant. Consonants can definitely switch around, which is why we say crocodile with the R at the beginning, while the word in Spanish is cocodrilo with the R at the end. But it's not really clear what he means, especially in a longer string of sounds. In the section talking about lexical root theory at the beginning, he claims that hallelujah, for example, is a reversed and reduced form of the Islamic shahada, which reads La ilaha illallah. Let that sink in. I mean, I don't know. It just seems extremely unlikely for a language speaker to somehow pronounce an entire phrase backward and have that be spread to other speakers. Also, I don't know what's up with this random how, but it's pretty funny. The rest of the paper pretty much continues with more of these examples, and then concludes with one of the most absurd sentences I've probably ever heard in my life. The percentage of shared pronouns between Arabic and English is 100%, which, according to Cowley's classification, which is in relation to the Swadesh list, means that they belong to or are dialects of the same language. According to Zaid and Jassam, English and Arabic are dialects of the same language. I mean, let that sink in, bro. First of all, he's going back on his words. In the paragraph about the Swadesh list, he also explains that based on the percentage of shared words between two languages, we can determine how long ago they split, and whether or not they should be considered dialects or entirely separate languages. Thing is, he also said this sort of classification has been severely attacked on various grounds which lie beyond the scope of this work. In my opinion, concluding by mentioning that 100% statistic is much more than enough to warrant a discussion of whether or not that number can actually be used to make legitimate conclusions, or if it can be trusted at all. Second of all, a 100% similarity rate, according to the percentage groups he mentions, would imply that English and Arabic became different languages less than 500 years ago, which is very obviously not true in the slightest. I mean, just look at Shakespeare and compare that to the writings of Ahmad ibn Fadlan, for example. I mean, bro, you'll hardly even find loanwords. I just don't understand. The biggest problem with the sound changes Jassam proposes from Arabic to English is that they all just feel like huge reaches, and mainly they're irregular. For context, let's now look at the comparative method, the more accepted way of assessing the relationship between languages. A main idea of the comparative method, among other things that will be discussed later, is to find systematic patterns of sound changes between languages. This isn't just creating random sound changes between individual words, but rather looking at the entire language and finding rigorous patterns. A really famous example is with the pa and fa sounds in Germanic and Romance languages. Let's look at the word for father in some of those languages. Germanic languages like English, Icelandic, and German tend to have an F sound, as in father, fadir, fata. In the Romance languages, though, the F in father tends to actually be a P instead, as in French père, Spanish padre, and indeed pater in Latin. What's important about these sound changes is that they are predictable. In many cases, an initial fa sound in a Germanic language will correspond to a pa sound in the equivalent word in the Romance language. This doesn't mean in all cases, but it is still a pattern that can be observed across a large amount of words. Fish, fiskur, fish, fis. And the Romance languages, poisson, pech, pêcher, Piscēs. This is also why more fancy fish-related words like pescatarian in English start with a P. We borrow them from Latin. Again, these sound changes are predictable, which leads to pretty strong evidence that they are groups of related languages. All the Germanic ones have fa, while all the Romance ones have pa. Another great example is with Maori and Hawaiian, which are Polynesian languages. You don't have to do guesswork with these languages. In almost all cases, if you apply a certain set of sound changes to and from, you will end up with the equivalent word in the other languages. Let's look at some of the correspondences. In Maori, you have ra, while in Hawaiian you usually have la. In Maori, ta is usually ka, which can also be pronounced ta. And Maori ka is usually a glottal stop in Hawaiian, which is a. So in Maori, for example, we have the word ariki, which is a type of chief. And if we change the sounds to match the ones Hawaiian has, we get ali'i, which is the same word in Hawaiian. It's correct. That's how it is. And we can do this backward too. If we take Hawaiian orelo, which means language, and apply the changes, we get the correct form in Maori, korero. Again, these are predictable sound changes in these languages. Here's some more examples. Rakai, la'au. Iti, iki. Kai, ai. What Zaid and Jassam is doing is looking at individual words instead and fantasizing about how they might have evolved, rather than looking at cross-language patterns. Let's try to look at words that start with fa in English and find their Arabic counterparts to see if we have this sort of similarity. Given he claims these are dialects that split less than 500 years ago, we should absolutely see at least some similarities, so let's find out. For comparison, I also have Dutch and Spanish off to the side. Father, ebb. Fish, semeca. Floor, ordia. Fresh, dozaj. Finger, ispa. Very clearly, I'm sorry, but there's just no chance. Besides, to confirm a genetic relationship, we need to do much more than look at sounds. We also need to consider other fields like morphosyntax or grammar. For example, Germanic languages tend to have a way of expressing possession on the noun, while Romance languages usually don't. These groups of languages share some features, which is why we might consider them to be a part of different families. They of course won't share all features, but definitely a large portion of them, and similar structures are often pretty good indicators of genetic similarity. In this regard, Arabic might honestly be the most different language in terms of its grammar to English you could get. I'd love to make a full video on the way Arabic makes words because it's absolutely fascinating, but let's just say it looks nothing like how we do it. Again, these languages are just completely different, and while it may hypothetically be possible for these changes to happen over thousands and thousands of years, it's exactly that. It's extremely unlikely and dare I say impossible for this to have happened in less than 500 years as he claimed. Another really important factor is to look at other fields like history and archaeology to analyze migration and language contact among other things, which Jessam has completely ignored. Essentially, you have to really stretch to link Arabic to English via sound changes, and Jessam does them all on an individual basis, while truthfully related languages have systematic and predictable patterns across large parts of the language that we can analyze. Anyone with enough knowledge of common processes of phonetic evolution can claim how one word comes from another, though this won't always be right. I can literally make up right now that the Ainu word for fire, which is ape, comes from Basque sute via this change. Sute, sutue, pupe, ape. And then go along explaining labialization, depalcalization and loss, vowel harmony, and making myself sound super fancy, but in doing so, I've ignored history, geography, archaeology, genealogy, language grammar, culture, etc. Lexical root theory is just, unfortunately, inadequate. It's just not enough. Additionally, coincidences happen all the time. One of the Japanese second-person singular pronouns anata happens to sound a lot like the Arabic second-person singular pronoun anta, but this doesn't immediately mean that Japanese must evidently come from Arabic and is a dialect of it. There's only so many sounds we can make with our mouths, and we're bound to have coincidences at some point. A lot of us also know of that Australian language Mbabaram, where the word for dog is literally dog. We know this is a coincidence, but Jessam would probably start claiming that that language is therefore a dialect of English, and by extension a dialect of Arabic. But, we're not doing that. And by the way, before we end, how in God's green earth did this paper land in the International Journal of Linguistics? What? Because this is peer-reviewed, right? So I did some digging and, a little sketchy, and I'm sure they've published good things in the past, but I guess this makes sense. Gotta get that money. I also looked through Jessam's academia.edu bio, and bro, this guy has a PhD and he teaches. So what Muslim kids be learning, bro? It's a little tragic, but In conclusion, what a guy and what a paper. This video is not necessarily saying he's wrong, it's more that everything he proposes just seems incredibly unlikely and unrealistic. Lexical root theory just reaches too much, and the evidence against it is extremely significant. Again though, the point of this video is not to attack Jessam, because we need multiple perspectives to advance scientific knowledge in any field. Actually, I'm thankful that he put his ideas out there, because advancing knowledge also means assessing the value of other perspectives. So criticizing work in all cases helps contribute to the propagation of knowledge. It's why we try to do peer review, for example. But yeah, hope you enjoyed watching, and I might have some short pedagogical videos coming up soon, so stay tuned for that. I want to keep experimenting with different types of videos and topics, so you could even expect some conlinking stuff in the future. As always, I read all of your comments, so feel free to leave your thoughts or critiques down below, since that's what this is all about. Have a great day or night wherever you are, and see you soon. Bye bye.